Today's podcast is sponsored by Grappa Restaurant, 22 Railroad Avenue, Warwick, New York. We have outdoor seating, indoor seating, upstairs bar, fantastic food and ambience. Come join us, Grappa Restaurant.
So I'm back. Hit the subscribe button if you like what you hear, ask questions, and catch me. Uh, we're at it again. So the subject today is going to be on the loyalty of the streets and the loyalty of the mafia. In my opinion, on some of the street gangs, and particularly we're going to talk about the black community because of where I grew up, and the difference, in my opinion, between black gangsters and the Italian mafia. People talk about the Italian mafia because of the organization and the structure of the Italian mafia over the years, and that's changed in the last decade and a half to 2 decades. They're definitely not what it used to be, and a lot of reasons for that, for the people that most people realize. I think it's because of the watering down of the quality of guys and the naivety of the guys they're recruiting, and also because of technology. And a big part of this is technology. But we're going to talk about where I grew up. I grew up on Jamaica Avenue. So I grew up with gangs like the Crazy Homicides, that were Spanish, white gang called 7 and 9, and the Black Panthers that were down in Highland Park in Brooklyn, for the people who don't know where they were based out of. And you have groups like Junior Black Mafia, guys like Ricky Jones out of Philadelphia. You had the coalition that runs a lot of these construction sites. It's not a gang, but it's a unity in structure is what I'm the reason why I'm bringing that into this. Also, you go down in South Jamaica and you had a famous group of guys with Supreme and the Supreme team. And you had Nicky Barnes and Bumpy and those guys, Johnson in Harlem. So when you're talking about over the years, the difference, I think one of the biggest differences, especially in the mob world, was because of the infrastructure that the Italian Mafia built themselves in when it first started back here in the 1900s, when they came from Italy and developed the Italian Mafia in the States, where you were involved in every industry we've talked about, from bookmaking to drugs to the construction industry to seaports and numbers racket, and you can go on. The other groups and some of these black gangs and groups weren't involved in the infrastructure. They're no different than, when I talk about the Albanian mafia. We're small clans of organizations. Very violent, control a lot of ports around the world, which makes them very strong because of them taking over certain areas, whether it's Colombia now, Ecuador. You can go around the map, and you'll have an Albanian community that's very strong in the streets. And same with the black community, they're very strong in the streets. I think the mistake is the organization of Albanian mob or the black community. They're not as organized, they're not as sophisticated, and there's too many small groups and pockets, and nobody wants to relinquish the leadership to somebody else. And if they had a meeting and sat down and tried to structure it where there's a hierarchy and there's a panel similar to the Italian Mafia, I think they'd be unstoppable. And again, for the people, this is a show. This is about my opinion, entertainment. It's not me advocating for any of these groups for me to teach them to develop into something more powerful. It's a talk about my opinion of where the guys from the street and what they come from. And one of the things, the telltale, is prison system. When you go to the prison system, the Italian mafia is weak, and it's just a fact. And when you go into serious prison systems, they're controlled, and the people will ask you who controls the prison system, depending on where you go. You have the ABs that are very violent and strong. You have the black crews that are very strong in prison, very dangerous. You have Texas Syndicate, the Mexican Mafia. I could go on with groups in jails. Bikers, depending on what state you're in and who's controlling that, whether it's the pagans, the warlocks, the Hells Angels, and who they ride with, because in jail, guys ride by state, cities, locations, demographics of where they're from. But I'm going to go backwards again, and I'm going to talk about why I believe the black community is so strong, because they're very violent. They're very violent, and that's a good thing as far as if you're on the street and you're trying to control things, but it's also a bad thing because they do a lot of crimes that, for a better lack of word, isn't intelligent. In other words, if you're a leader in a black crew and you try to put down a group of guys that are underneath you, there should be rules of, if you execute a woman, you get executed. If you commit a crime against a local store owner, you get hurt bad or killed. And if they structured it different, they'd have more respect with the community, and it would safeguard what they're doing. The problem is, similar to the Albania community, it's almost like a free-for-all. Nobody wants to relinquish power. Nobody wants to relinquish their egos to develop into a stronger organization, like the Italian Mafia. With the Italian Mafia, you have 5 major crime families. And you also have offshoots, the Philadelphia Mob, you have the Cavalcanti family, and you have different outsources of the mob, the Chicago outfit in obviously Chicago. And in the black community, you don't have that. You have different groups and organizations. You have the Chicago Disciples, you have different guys in different areas, but none of them are state to state. It's kind of like when I grew up in 7 and 9, started off as a local gang just on 79th Street, Jamaica Avenue, for the people who don't know where they started. And they started developing different chapters, no different than what the Hells Angels did, or the Warlocks, or the Pagans. They developed chapters outside of their area of where they started, the development of their organizations. And for strength, you need unity. And for unity, you need control and rules. And if you don't live by those rules, you're not going to last long on the street. You're going to go to jail. You're going to catch cases. You're going to lose respect with the community if there's bad crimes being committed against the community, against women, against store owners. And that's the issue with the first issue with law enforcement, because the community gets all over law enforcement when they're not controlling and protecting their communities. So over the last couple of decades, you have the weakness of the Italian Mafia. Now, I'm not saying, because people jump on every word that you say on these talks, I'm not saying the majority of the Italian mob isn't wild, isn't tough, isn't shooters. There's a handful of violent guys that do most of the work, or did most of the work in the past, for their families. They're the strong arm guys. Now they're recruiting guys that are weaker, drug users. I'm not saying drug addicts, but drug users, and it's more accepted than years ago. Years ago, if they were, it was done behind closed doors. It was quietly. You would never admit it. The way they carry themselves, the way they dress, the way they talk, they're almost gang-like, thuggish, so they're not respected. They're moving around more like a bunch of kids that frequent a nightclub or a gym. they're shooting steroids, and they believe that that makes them well respected and tough guys. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. But the truth is, the black community is very violent still. And if you just pick up and Google or read a newspaper, and you'll see in each community shooting after shooting, killing after killing, and you know that when we talk about the south side of Chicago, every weekend there's dozens of shootings. Now again, is that the right way to develop and be respected? No, absolutely not. But the fear factor of these black communities is definitely there. If they were able to develop a leadership and bylaws of how they conduct themselves, you would see a major difference in the financial sector of what they're doing, the money they're bringing in, and it shouldn't go in one person's pocket. And the problem, again, is when you have these little groups, and it's friendships, or you want to say gangs. I'm very, over the years, I've been very close, and people know they've seen them on my shows with a lot of Bloods. I knew them from I was a kid. They were on my podcast. I got involved in doing music videos with some of them, and so I have relationships with different guys in the black community over the years, and the respect from. And again, I'm not here to advocate for guys to go out and commit crimes. Because a guy's out there doing things on the street, I'm not his father, I'm not his judge, I'm not God. I have my own rules of what I do today from what I did back then. I'm just stating facts of the street world, from my experience, from my friendships, from the prison system here in America, and also construction sites. One of the smartest moves in the black community made was the coalitions, because this is exactly where the Italian mafia started, in construction, where there's a ton of money, and if you have guys that are respected in that community that understands that the street is about a dollar bill. It's not about hurting people, killing people, and it's also about longevity. If you conduct yourself properly, you're going to last out there for a long time. If you start committing senseless crimes, or your friends are, and you can't control them, you're going to have a short-lived experience on the street with no money and no family. You're going to lose it all. And you know, the idea is to get out of those communities. And we all do it for the same reason, no different than me. We didn't know anything better, so we wanted to get out of our area. So, you know, I say we live by our zip code. If you grow up in Beverly Hills, the idea of you growing up on the street and running and slinging drugs and robbing is a lot slimmer than guys like us that grew up in area codes like mine, right? So zip codes like mine, where you're on the street and you go to Franklin K. Lane High School early in the morning, and everybody's out in the yard and everybody's making deals before school. And those deals are anywhere from guns to, you know, swag, stolen merchandise, to our relationships in different areas of New York. We're making drug deals, whether it's cocaine, whether it was pills. Back in our day, there was a lot of ecstasy and pills like the, you know, Black Beauties, things like that, that we were moving besides cocaine. Obviously, it was a big one, especially in our era, to heroin. So early morning school was more so a learning from the streets by being in those schools and those areas. And that's another reason why I advocate for some of these kids that are stuck in these neighborhoods to be able to have school choice. And I believe you have school choice, it's your first opportunity to get out of your area where it's ridden with crime, and to see something different and have a learning experience in a positive way. The problem is, as much as our politicians say they care, about our inner city kids. It's rhetoric. And I'm not going to get too far into politics, but the rhetoric is we have no money for these inner city schools, we don't have it for their education, their health care, and, but they have $500 billion to give to illegal immigrants that are coming to the country. And all of a sudden they find that money, they find free hotels, they find Xboxes, telephones, and a whole assortment of opportunities for illegals, but don't have the assortment of opportunities for the kids that grow up in my neighborhood. And so people know where I stand politically. I'm against what they've done to the inner city kids. They don't give them the opportunities that are fair, and then they put them in a position. And I'm not saying, just like I always said about myself, I take responsibility for the choices I made. But when you put a chocolate cake out in this hand, and then you put breadcrumbs out in this hand, most of us from the inner city are going to run towards a chocolate cake. And that's the manipulation of what I say against these governments, whether it's somebody that I don't really like is in the political field, AOC, because she's making herself rich. She left the inner city kids. She abandoned them for illegal immigrants. And she's charging for illegal immigrants while she's dressing in and going to these galas in these outfits that are incredible, $5,000 outfits. And she's finding the funds for them and hotel space for them, but that single mom that's trying to educate her kid, she doesn't advocate for school choice for that child. So there's a double standard for their own power, their own money, and for their own votes. And they're left behind the kids from our neighborhood. So I'm not saying they're justified for committing these crimes, or that I'm not justified trying to teach somebody how to be a better criminal. And I'm not trying to justify that. I'm just talking factual, where our community could go to better themselves. And I hope they all take the right path. And those kids that know me, from the guys I just talked about that were on my shows, to some of the music videos I did with the Bloods, to some of these guys. So the people out there that I do know, they understand because we had these conversations. A lot of their friends, they can't control when someone does something stupid, does a dumb crime, and it hurts what people think about them. I understand the mindset, and I understand you're watching our government bullshit them, and then they want what's theirs, or what they believe is theirs. And I mean, the way to get there is what I'm trying to advocate for, and that's doing it the right way. And that means getting people that are going to speak for you in your community leaders, like Dan, who we've done shows together in Brownsville. We talk. You guys were on a group chat for a couple of weeks, and I was in the middle of those chats, not engaging, but just listening and reading and watching. For the people who don't remember Dan, he's been on the show plenty of times. He's one of the biggest advocates in Brownsville for the black community, one of the nicest gentlemen that I've met over the years. His buddy Michael passed away. We spoke about him. He was on the show plenty of times. Rest in peace to Michael. And the work they've done with the kids in the inner city is commendable, far beyond what words can say here. But when I'm listening, and I just recently, somebody sent me, and I won't watch some of these shows by some X-Street guys, and they were discussing the black community. I don't know what they said. It doesn't matter to me. They didn't grow up like us. They didn't grow up in those areas like me and you guys. So whatever their opinion is, maybe later on in life, they had an opinion from jails, but they didn't grow up in our neighborhoods. They didn't go to our schools. They didn't know what it was to eat peanut butter and jelly for lunch every day, grits in the morning, because our families had no money, to taping our sneakers with electric tape when there was holes in it, to have no wallpaper on the walls of your house. We get it. I get it. I know exactly where you come from, and that's why we've, over the years, became such close friends. And again, my kids grew up with your kids, and so we all know each other since generations of interaction. But when someone and guys talk about and almost belittle, and I don't know what any other word to use, when they belittle the black community for the Italian mob about toughness, that's ridiculous, because the black community grew up hardcore. It's like the guys that go to the front line in the war and veterans that I know that were frontline guys, and then you have the pencil pushers that work in the back office. They don't know what the front line is. Are they guys that care about the country? Yeah, for the most part. But they're not frontline warriors. And no different than the inner city guys that I know. You guys are frontline warriors. You grew up hardcore in every manner, from your households to the streets to jails to prisons to losing family members like myself. We know what it is because we suffered everything there is to suffer in the inner city. Unlike some of the guys that I'm talking about in that life, they grew up, a lot of them spoiled rotten. They grew up like the unions. My father's a wise guy, so I'm going to be a wise guy, so my son's going to be a wise guy. But they're clueless. If you place them in our neighborhood, they wouldn't last a day. No different when they go to prisons. And you guys notice they're paying. They're paying somebody, whether it's on a soft shake or it's just them paying completely, just straightforward paying and sending a check somewhere. So that's the life of our life and the difference to their life. Although I worked with the Italian Mafia, and I have a lot of friends, and a lot of them are tough. And again, I'm not talking about all of them. I'm talking about a good majority of them are soft. They're nowhere near what goes on in the inner cities. They're nowhere near where we all grew up watching our friends die at young ages, 12, 13, 14, 15. One after another, they're being killed or they're being shot in random gunfire, accidentally, to out on the parks, in the street, and moving around with drugs and violence, and get involved in survival. Because really that's what it is. We learn to survive. And what we learned you can never teach. It's an education that these guys from these other areas will never have because they didn't grow up that way. They went home, they got brand new cars, they went back, watched their color TV when it first came out. They had the best clothes, jewelry, they're going out to nightclubs spending money that their parents gave them, and they're just spoiled. They're not hardcore guys. I can run through a ton of wise guys that I know who made their kids. They had no business in the mob. They never did anything. They didn't grow up in this. They just grew up and they stay in their little areas because of that. Because in their little areas they get away with it because of their family ties, and people are intimidated when they hear the word mafia. But if we bring them, and you guys notice, we bring them down to South Bushwick, or we bring them to Brownsville, or we bring them to the projects, we bring them to Prospect, we bring them to South Jamaica. You know as well as I do, their shoes will be taken, their socks will be taken off them, and they won't have they don't even have the intelligence to understand where they're at. And to them it would be like they're in the middle of Iraq. And that's why they're home in their little neighborhoods and they stay there. Again, going back to my culture, being Albanian, and the black community was similar in a lot of ways. We didn't want to give up the power structure to somebody else. So we stay in small clans and communities, and we fight each other. We go against each other instead of uniting with each other. And if we ever had the ability to unite with each other, to that extent, the Italian Mafia wouldn't exist. And it wouldn't have existed this long. But there is no pushback over the years, and now with where the Italian Mafia went with technology and the recruitment of such weak guys around them, they would never last in our world. And my message at the end of this, before we close out, is I'm hoping our communities wake up to a new beginning. And that means not in the street, not in crime. Through people in our community like Dan that advocate for opportunity zones, for a new beginning for education. Funds that instead of going to illegal immigrants go to sports facilities, health facilities, new education facilities, trade opportunities, and the opportunity to see the world in a different light instead of through violence and through killing. And I hope some of these messages, by all the years I spent in prison, for you guys that I'm talking about, from all the communities I spoke about, the black communities, black groups, gangs that grew up with me, the jails together, that we pass that message on to our kids. My friend Reese, that I spoke about before, is in Wisconsin, and came home from jail recently after 20-something years, and like me, lost a child. And we talk about God, we talk about positive things, we talk about sending our communities in the right direction now. And hopefully, we're the same people, we have the same DNA, but our beliefs and our maturity and our experiences change us to look to help you guys save your lives and your kids' lives before you lose your lives like we did to prison or to being killed. And hopefully you guys heed that advice, and you guys know always you can reach out to me. Bugatti, when I'm in Chicago, I'll see you soon. Young guy with his head on right and changed his life, and he advocates in the right direction. And some of the other guys that are friendly with me down on the south side, all you guys, I wish you well, and hit me up, subscribe, ask me questions, and hit that like button. I appreciate everybody listening, and again, happy 4th of July, Independence Day. And remember, we come first, our neighborhoods come first, America first, and love for our country, love for our community. But we need to step up from negative living to positive living for ourselves, for our family. And hopefully that message gets through to everybody. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you guys listening. And follow me on my Instagram, John Elite, Facebook, the same. You want to hit me on my website. And if I don't answer you directly, some of the people that work my pages, they will. The message will eventually get to me. And if you want to hire me for any engagements, you can hit me on any of those also. I look forward to hearing everybody. All right, guys. Thanks, man.